Hi, y'all. This is a follow up to the basic meditation practice of focusing. And I encourage you to watch this follow up and this processing at least one day after trying the practice itself. That way, you have the experience of it first, and you can sit with that and sleep on it and integrate that a little bit before processing other options and ideas. So in that video of the focusing practice, I talked about different options of what to focus on. And one of the things we want to be really mindful of is that there are more constant elements to focus on and less constant elements to focus on. So for instance, in that video, the options that I suggested were the breath, or a word or a phrase, or sounds, or counting. And so the first two are something more constant. The breath is more constant than sounds, relatively speaking. And a word or a phrase is more constant than counting. And so the essential elemental practice of focusing is best done with a more constant point of focus, like your breath, like a word or a phrase. A lot of people like to use Om. That vibration is very powerful, very loving. So that's a great focus to use, Om. There's also like short phrases that you could use, 1 to 3 words or so. When you get into the less constant foci, you're doing a different practice, especially if we want to look at counting, for instance. So if you wanted to choose your favorite number, let's say your favorite number is 12, and you're continuing to come back around to the number 12, that's good. That's a constant focus. Counting opens up a whole range of different practices that I suggest you play around with, just knowing that the constant focus is the more essential and more important basic practice. And so if we look at counting, for instance, you could count up to a certain number, like 12, and then back. That is a distinct practice from counting to 12 and then repeating from 1. So if you go up and back, it's a different practice than if you go up and start over again. And then that's also a different practice from counting as far as you can go until you lose track and starting over again at 1. All those are distinct practices that are going to teach your body and your mind something new. So play around with it, do a little bit of both. However, just know that the basic practice and the most essential practice is choosing a more constant focal point. The other thing is, I talked about how you can do the practice of focusing both vertically, like this, right, sitting up, or horizontally, so lying flat. And when you lie flat on the ground, you just want to be careful not to support your neck too high. Otherwise, your spine then is not in alignment. So just a very nice, like flatter pillow for your neck, and just kind of positioning that just right so that your spine is fully elongated again. That's what a horizontal practice looks like. And I recommend you definitely do both and play around with both. And so there's all those different aspects of the practice. And then there are some common cited experiences with this basic meditation practice of focusing that come up. The first being I'm not doing it right, my mind's all over the place. Well, first of all, that's great that you're aware of that. That's what we want in meditation, is we just want an awareness. And so there's never really not doing it right. Throw that idea out of the window, right? This is not a practice that you can do right or wrong. This is just simply a process of awareness. And so you can sit back and think to yourself, my mind was all over the place, and that was really hard for me. That felt uncomfortable. That made me anxious. I got angry about that. I got frustrated. Whatever the case is for you, all you want to do is bring your awareness up a level so that you think to yourself, that was my experience. Okay, so that's the first thing. And in time, that will get better. It will ebb and flow, but in time, your mind becomes more focused with a regular meditation practice. The second commonly cited experience is I can't sit still. And that was my experience when I started to like more formally meditate when I was about 19. And it was extremely uncomfortable. And sometimes I still have that fidgety energy. And so again, we're just aware of that. And if it becomes too uncomfortable, we can always open our eyes. We can adjust our body. There's no need, I feel, to sit perfectly still. If you're moving around more, just notice that. If you're more still at some points, notice that. But yeah, like if you're fidgeting, feel free to make an adjustment, shorten your meditation practice that day. I know for me, I was real fidgety for a long time, years and years, and it would kind of ebb and flow, and it would be different based on the day. But I don't think I started to become less fidgety until I was in my late 20s, actually, and I'm 40 now. So, you know, but I didn't abandon the practice. And so we don't want to abandon the practice based on our experiences. We just want to notice them and then do our best to meet ourselves where we're at, be a little bit uncomfortable, but not so uncomfortable that we're becoming dysregulated and falling apart, right? So just find that line for you. A lot of people will also say that they fall asleep during meditation, especially if they're lying flat. It's okay to fall asleep. And you can play around with different practices, maybe more vertical practices. You can notice to yourself, maybe I need more sleep. Maybe I'm not getting quality sleep if I'm going to fall asleep that easily. That can sometimes be true. It can sometimes be information about the quality or the quantity of your sleep. And that can be a very important piece of information for you to tune into and then determine what to do about. But don't be too hard on yourself. Set a timer, and if you fall asleep, wake up, and the next time you'll see what it does for you, you know. So again, we don't want to abandon the practice. We want to just make small adjustments to meet ourselves where we're at. In terms of lengthening the period of time, that is a goal I suggest for everybody. And so you might begin with just a couple minutes of seated focus practice. And again, you're wanting to, over time, gradually increase the length of your time periods. And part of that is that it takes a little bit to settle and for your brain waves to slow down. And so part of the power of meditation is that we are shifting our brain waves and coming into more powerful, if we want to call it that, brainwave states, where like our vibration is different, our frequency is different, and that's really so good for the body, for the rest of the world, for our connection with the divine, if that's something that you perceive. If it's not, that's okay. Your connection with the rest of the planet, however you perceive that. But yeah, those brainwave states are really important. And so we're usually in beta And we want to gradually, so that's a faster frequency. We want to gradually slow that down so that we enter the alpha or even the theta state. So just some thoughts out there about the importance of extending the period of time that you sit. Plus, you're going to notice more, and you're going to train yourself to focus for longer periods of time. And again, that I mentioned this in the video of the practice, but that is so powerful because it teaches us how to control where we put our energy, or how to lead. I like that word better, how to lead where we put our energy. So instead of our energy being pinged around by different parts of our brain, we are practicing our intuition, leading that process and directing how we focus our energy. And that's what creates a more harmonious and beautiful experience, both for ourselves and then collectively. So in terms of sitting for long periods of time, one of my meditation teachers, Wes Tudor, suggests to really look at your seat, the way that you're seated, how comfortable that is for you, and just bringing that into a state of being as comfortable as possible for you to sit for extended periods of time. So that information is out there. You can look into that just in terms of getting the right pillows. I know Wes talks about your hips being higher than your knees. There's a lot of teachers that talk about that. And that's something that I try to do when I'm seated. And then people will say, like, what do I do with my hands? I say do whatever feels comfortable. I had a reflexologist and like a Reiki practitioner, Bonnie, once tell me that, like, if your palms are up, you're in a space of receiving, and if your palms are down, you're in a space of kind of coming into yourself. And so that's something that you can consider. I have found that to be true for myself. And some people, you know, like, there's just different properties to how you place your hands. We're not going to go into that here, but that information is also out there. But I just try to do what feels comfortable, especially when you're just starting out. And then some people are not comfortable in cross-legged position, and that's okay. You can sit on a chair with your feet flat, just things like that. So just make yourself comfortable as you're starting to practice. I welcome you to submit any comments. You can always email me, you know, through YouTube, or my email's on YouTube, my email's on my website, sopeace.org. So if you're having challenges or you have questions, I welcome you to reach out to engage with others about that. And as we go, we can talk about how there can be very difficult experiences that come up in meditation. And so I've talked a little bit about that before in one of my other follow-ups, but I'll talk about that more as we go along. Generally speaking, as a new practitioner, you're not going to experience, you know, falling into the mystical world, which can be a very frightening experience. But, you know, we'll talk about that as we go along, and those resources are out there if you do have a scary or uncomfortable experience while meditating, and people do. It can be a trip. So just know that is true, but that usually comes when you're on a retreat, or you're doing a very long meditation, or you're starting to advance in your practice. But if you do have that experience, again, feel free to reach out and I can point you in the direction of some resources. Be well.